Hello, and welcome to the North State Breakdown with Benjamin Nguyen. Today I'd like to discuss some of the recent activities of the newly elected Shasta County District One Supervisor Kevin Crye. In November of 2022, Kevin Crye was narrowly elected to the seat with a mere 90 votes over his opponent, Aaron Resner. His tenure as supervisor officially began in January of 2023. At the time of this recording, he has been in office for a little over 4 months and is already making headlines. On February 28th, in just his second month on the job, Crye joined far-right District 4 Supervisor and Board Chair Patrick Jones, as well as Supervisor of District 5 Chris Kellstrom, in a controversial vote to cancel a contract with Dominion Voting.
Any other discussion on R4? We'll call for a roll call count, starting with Supervisor Rickert.
Supervisor Rickert?
No.
Supervisor Garman?
I'm actually going to vote no.
Supervisor Jones?
Yes.
Supervisor Kellstrom?
Yes.
And Supervisor Crye?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
Earlier in the same meeting, Crye interrogates Assistant County Clerk Johanna Francisca about potential financial conflicts of interest regarding a grant that the board was to vote on.
Have you ever taken any compensation, a stipend, any kind of money?
The only thing I did is I attended a training by them, and they paid for my air fees when I was, my airplane tickets to get there, when I was just a supervisor within the office. I wasn't the assistant.
You fill out Form 700s, correct?
I do, yes, correct.
Okay.
But at that time, when I took that money, I was not required to fill out a Form 700 as I was a lower line staff.
I found this comment by Supervisor Crye to be hypocritical, because during his campaign he filed his 700 form improperly, stating he had no economic interests, despite owning talent agency Valor Talent and the Ninja Coalition Gym. In fact, just recently Ninja Coalition just received a $340,000 contract from the Gateway District. In California, the penalty for willfully filing a false or incomplete statement of economic interests is a fine not to exceed $2,500, or imprisonment in a county jail not to exceed 6 months, or both. In addition, the person may be disqualified from holding public office for a period of 5 years. Getting back to Dominion, the board's reasoning for canceling the contract is not based on any type of fact, but instead political ideology. Allegations of cheating in elections are often based on speculation or misinformation. For example, some people have claimed that voting machines were hacked in the 2020 election. However, there is no evidence to support this claim. A large number of independent investigations have found that the 2020 election was not hacked. One such investigation was conducted by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. CISA is a federal agency that is responsible for protecting the nation's critical infrastructure, including election systems. In a report released in January of 2021, CISA stated that there was, quote, no evidence that any voting system was compromised in the 2020 election. Another investigation was conducted by the Senate Intelligence Committee. The committee interviewed election officials, cybersecurity experts, and other individuals with knowledge of the 2020 election. In a report released in June of 2021, the committee stated that it, quote, found no evidence of widespread voter fraud or election interference. In addition to these investigations, there have been a large number of lawsuits filed that the 2020 election was rigged or stolen. However, none of these lawsuits have been successful. In fact, a number of judges have dismissed these lawsuits, stating they lack evidence on that they are based on speculation or misinformation. One such allegation was that in the 2020 election that mail-in ballots swaying votes to the Democratic Party was evidence of election tampering. Chris Stalwart, a former political editor at Fox News, described the network's early call that Trump lost the swing state of Arizona, the so-called red mirage phenomenon on Election Day, and how Trump tried to exploit it.
So, in the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. In every election, certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead. When you put together a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't matter which piece you put in first. It ends up with the same image. So for us, who cares? But that's because no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system.
The overwhelming evidence shows that voting systems are secure and allegations of cheating are not based on fact. This evidence was so strong that rather than fight the claim against them for disseminating misinformation, Fox News decided to settle with Dominion for $787.5 million. With that in mind, the Shasta County Board majority still chose to pursue discontinuing the Dominion contract without cause. Since then, some interesting revelations have come to pass. with District 1 Supervisor Kevin Crye at the center of them. On that same February 28th meeting, Kevin Crye made a statement that he had reached out to controversial election denier Mike Lindell and discussed the possibility of creating an escrow account that Lindell would provide resources and funds for the purpose of fighting potential lawsuits the county would face by discontinuing the Dominion contract.
So I went out and I made some phone calls, and I have an email here, and I'll read it. This is from a gentleman named Mike Lindell. Spoke with him multiple times, reached out to him because I have no problem spending other people's money, not your money as taxpayers, but if a private individual wants to put up money for something. And I'll read you the email, and I don't agree with all of it. As I promised, if you have any pushback, including lawsuits against you or your county, I will provide all of the resources necessary, both including financial and legal, for this fight.
In a following meeting that took place on March 14th, a community member asks Crye if he met with Lindell in person.
So when you did fly across to meet with Mr. Lindell, did you use taxpayer money to fund that trip?
I did fly out there, absolutely.
Okay. Was it with taxpayer money?
I was on a county-sponsored trip. Parts of my trip I paid for myself that were outside the purview of the county, yes.
After this exchange, a public records request was placed to get the details of the trip. What was uncovered was that a total of $1,393.89 was spent at taxpayers' expense to meet in person with Mr. Lindell in Minnesota. It's unclear exactly how much contact Crye has had with Lindell, except it would appear that he may have been in contact during the February 28th meeting, based on a statement Lindell made on his website, Frank Speech.
I get a call yesterday by Kevin Crye. They're voting down there, and they were going to vote. Kevin says, you know what, Mike, he called me up. He reached out to me, and he said, Mike, can you tell me about this stuff? Now, as we speak, everybody, it's still going on. It's 6 hours. This has been going on down there. They're all pleading, don't go to paper, please. And the machine companies are calling in. I just got a notice. I believe he said, no, I'm voting for paper. They're using the handicap laws or the handicap going, you can't do this because you have to have the handicap covered.
This suggests he was in communication with Crye during the actual meeting. In fact, we now know that to be true based on a public records request. What's troubling to citizens is the statement about the disabled. Lindell seems to be discounting just how important it is for citizens with disabilities to vote secretively and securely, naively suggesting that removing electronic voting systems would somehow fix all election-related issues. On March 12th, on a radio show that Supervisor Crye hosts periodically on KCNR, he made a similarly troubling statement about the disabled.
Let's just say, and again, this is absolutely hypothetical, I don't have the answer. But let's say it costs, I don't know, but for argument's sake, and I don't even know what the number would be. Let's say $500,000 to have machines, whatever that looks like. And there is 50 voters that it's going to impact, possibly negatively, in terms of they're going to have a caregiver or somebody else help them with that vote, and there may be a secondary person. So, is it 200,000? Is it 500,000? Is it $1 million? What's the number that says, hey, for these 50 voters, we're going to go this way because the county saves this much money, and it is 50 voters?
It appears as if Crye is suggesting that there is somehow an acceptable number of disabled voters who can be disenfranchised in the name of financial savings to the county. There are numerous legal implications surrounding the need for special voting machines for people with disabilities. Under the Americans with Disability Act, all public entities, including state and local governments, are required to provide reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities to participate in all aspects of civic life, including voting. This means that polling places must be accessible to individuals with disabilities, including the availability of voting machines. Failure to provide these accommodations can result in legal action and potential violations of civil rights. Additionally, the Help America Vote Act of 2002 provides funding for states to improve accessibility to voting for individuals with disabilities, including the purchase of accessible voting machines. The use of special voting machines not only ensures equal access to the voting process for people with disabilities, but also helps comply with legal obligations to provide reasonable accommodations. Fortunately, Even as the board majority further explores moving forward with an experimental hand-counting tabulation program, at a recent meeting they somewhat hesitantly made the decision to pursue machines for disabled voters to help them mark a ballot. This will be at significant cost to the county, without the benefits of the tabulators we had previously. Still, the county has been having a somewhat troubled relationship with the disabled community. At the very same meeting on February 28th, HHSA Administration Director Megan Dorney gave a presentation regarding the Opportunity Center's troubled finances. The Opportunity Center is a program that employs vulnerable members of the community with meaningful work. It was established in 1964 and has been in operation for nearly 60 years. While the financial burden of the Opportunity Center is understandable, it was never intended to operate at a profit. It was intended to benefit the disabled community members who wanted to contribute to society. It was a program that managed to remain solvent for much of that time. The statement I found troubling is one Dorney makes regarding disabled clients of the Opportunity Center not wanting to do the jobs that were available.
Fewer referrals. The OC clients, a lot of them, or these clients don't want to work these blue-collar jobs. These are things like janitorial. They're going around and picking up, shredding, they're sorting recycling for the city of Reading. They're not interested in those types of jobs.
Many community members have spoken out against this narrative, and it is unclear if there is merit to the agency's claims. At this meeting, the board voted on a soft close for the Opportunity Center, which will see its doors shuttered sometime around June of this year. Another such issue I've seen lately regarding ADA compliance with Shasta County is the service they utilize for recording and streaming public meetings, a service called AV Capture All. All board meetings are live streamed and memorialized on the service. One extremely important feature that is included with the service is live closed captioning, as well as on-demand closed captioning once the on-demand video has been posted. The reason I bring this up is because this feature does not appear to work consistently. Here's the page of some of the most recent meetings. This chat bubble icon represents videos that have closed captioning. They should all have this, but recent videos often do not have subtitles shortly after posting, despite AV Capture All advertising that within minutes of publishing closed captioning would be available, sometimes only becoming available days or even weeks later. In January of this year, I made an inquiry to the clerk of the board via email to ask why meetings in 2021 did not have closed captioning, to which I was given the response that the county only recently added the captioning service to their contract and that the vendor's working on adding subtitles to their older meetings. I found this concerning, particularly when there are timely subjects regarding citizens with disabilities that a segment of our community, however small, could effectively be unable to civically engage with their community. Getting back to Supervisor Crye, there are a multitude of concerns that his district has with him, the Dominion decision notwithstanding, but also a matter of general dishonesty. At Crye's March 16th town hall, the room was filled with District 1 members who wished to share their concerns about the board's recent direction. The piece I wanted to mention was that a woman named Susan Taylor spoke at the meeting, and Crye greeted her as if they had just met.
So you said it was Susan? Susan, so if you could, please make sure after you're done, connect with Carolyn. I'd love to get your information.
Crye had previously selected Susan Taylor as a member of the Community Advisory Committee to select a new CEO. Later in a telephone interview, Crye would admit to knowing her. In addition to his near $1,400 expenditure to Minnesota, Crye recently had an arcade machine installed to his office. Here's the invoice from Facilities Management. As you can see, Supervisor Crye requested that items be hung up in his office, including the installation of an arcade machine. The arcade was installed for a cost of $110.53. All of this culminated on the April 25th board meeting when a group by the name of Shasta Citizens for Stable Governance served Kevin Crye with intent to recall paperwork.
Supervisor Crye, you've betrayed the trust of District 1 voters. You campaigned on fiscal responsibility, ensuring the county doesn't get sued, and on being a uniter and a healer. You've done none of those things. Rather, you voted to throw away millions of taxpayer dollars by relying on the disproven opinions of election denier Mike Lindell and terminating the contract with Dominion Voting Systems in favor of a costly and untested hand count system. The Register of Voters has initially estimated that this move will cost the county an extra $1.65 million for each statewide election going forward. In addition, you abstained from voting against an unconstitutional Second Amendment resolution because you were more concerned about your personal liability than the county liability. Finally, the fact that you even considered offering the CEO position to a divisive and extremist candidate like Chris Street, who was held liable for $7 million in financial mismanagement and who is second in charge of New California State, an organization dedicated to splitting California, was an outrage and an embarrassment to all of us. Our county's in crisis and we must act now. Your recall is necessary to preserve our limited resources and return stable government to Shasta County.
The group will have 10 days to get their proponents' signatures and letter of intent turned into the registrar of voters. If approved, it will begin the official petition circulation for Crye's recall. If you're interested in more information, please visit recallkevincrye.org. And that's the breakdown.